The big problem here is the individual people's access to their government. With that Cora bill, you're saying, no, you can't be in here. And also, and this was a bigger deal with that Cora, I think, than the open meetings law, but they're saying, see, these people over here, they call themselves media. And why the government is in the business of defining media is beyond me. But nonetheless, these people over here, they're special. They're media. We're going to have different requirements for you than for them. And I think they do it to buy their silence.
What gets somebody to actually report on local government and love it so much? We're going to find that out soon. But first, like and subscribe to our channel. Click on that little bell icon, get those notifications. Find Devil's Advocate Podcast on your favorite platform. So, Cory Gaines of the Colorado Accountability Project, what has enticed you to Colorado politics?
It started in COVID, and just the more I started doing it, the more frustrated I got, and the more I wanted to share with people.
When you say started it, what is it?
Well, it would be my website, essentially, or even just, I guess if you go all the way back into COVID, right in the depths, the very beginning of COVID, I started writing lots of emails. I would write to the assembly all the time. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you, the legislative branch, doing something to run the state? Why did you just abdicate and leave it to the governor to take care of everything? Why aren't the people most closely tied to us making the decisions instead of one man? And all I ever heard back from was the Republicans. And all they ever said was, great job, Cory, we agree with you, but we can't do anything about it. Just politically.
We're the minority.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought eventually I got tired of doing that, so I started writing things, op-eds, and then I eventually started my own Facebook page so that I could start communicating directly to people with the goal that, like the people in this state, with the goal that maybe if they were aware of what's going on and I shared with them ways that they can get involved, more of them would start getting involved and speaking up too.
So you started a Substack, Colorado Accountability Project. Great name, but more importantly, great work. You write for Complete Colorado. We're very grateful about that. What I have found so unique about what you do is you're reporting the stories that the newspapers used to report. You're asking these simple questions of, why are we doing it that way? And if you look at what he said 2 years ago, it was completely opposite of what they're doing now. We used to have 500 reporters between two newspapers in this town. And so you would kind of get that type of simple investigation, not months-long, deep, undercover with secret cameras and microphones, but just wait a second, let's take a look at the facts. What sort of things do you like to report on the most?
I tackle a little bit of everything. I think the things that interest me the most are energy policy, transportation. I'm actually a teacher by profession. I don't do this for money. So education is a big one. And another big one for me, I'm a transplant. I live way out on the Eastern Plains. And another big one for me is rural issues. Rural and small town issues, particularly because I think the Front Range, both in terms of demographics and policy, it might as well be that the rest of the state doesn't exist. And the stuff that they're doing here in Denver and Colorado Springs and et cetera, and the things that they want to do there, they don't necessarily work out where I live.
Give me an example.
There are several, but one that comes immediately to mind is I remember once I was testifying on a bill, and it was 1 or 2 assembly sessions ago, and it was something about limiting the ability to have choice in how you heat your home and cook your food. So, yet another one of those bills where it's...
outlaw gas stoves and gas heaters and gas water heaters.
Exactly. And so we're going to electrify everything. And I remember thinking, because I remember hearing it, and it was right around the time that we had just had a pretty bad snowstorm out where I'm at. Now, snowstorm, even with just a little bit of snow, there's no mountains, there's not a lot of trees. And so one of my colleagues was stuck at home for 6 or 7 days. She literally could not leave her ranch because the loader that her husband was running was not fast enough to move the drifts out of the way so her little minivan could punch a hole through. Now, if you're in one of those isolated houses and the single power line that comes to your house breaks and you've electrified everything, you don't have propane, you don't have gas, nothing. Guess where on the priority list your one power line to your own house is going to be on Excel's list? Near the bottom. 6 or 7 days without heat. It's just those kinds of things.
It's deadly.
Yeah.
It's absolutely deadly.
Yeah, and they don't think about that here in the Front Range, because here in the Front Range, if there's a power outage, it's an inconvenience for a day or two, but they're going to come and fix it pretty quick. I mean, maybe a tree fell down or something.
Or in the case of Boulder, they just turn it off when the wind gets bad because they don't want to start any more fires.
Yeah, well, that's one of the
reasons. And then
reasons.
everybody's food goes bad in the refrigerators and people.
That's why I sold my tractor and I'm working on building a generator right now. So.
You also mentioned to me once in a conversation about in a small town, it's not like you have a whole lot of choice when it comes to buying an EV, getting an EV repaired, getting your solar panels repaired or installed. When the legislature is so urban-centric, they seem to think the whole state can run out to Home Depot.
Yeah. I'm open to a lot of that stuff. If I could have an EV that would act like my little Geo, and oranges for oranges.
Oh, you drive a Geo, you sexy, sexy man. No wonder you.
1997, ladies, but I'm already spoken for. So, at any rate, we own
1997 Geo.
Yeah,
man.
Well, that's what you give up when you become a teacher. You forego having that Hummer or the Corvette, or unless I wanted to have a 30-year note on it, maybe.
Right.
So, at any rate, we have 2019 hybrid. My wife is really into earth and renewables and polluting and consuming less and et cetera. So we got a hybrid. She had one before and we got a new hybrid. The closest dealership that can fix it, I'm in Sterling. The closest dealership is Greeley. And that's probably an hour and a half away. No one else around there can fix it. And so if you start talking about we're going to electrify things and get heat pumps and the rest, when I put AC in my house, I put it in because I have hot water heat, so I put an air handler and I did all the grunt work because that's how I can afford these things. And I had to have a mechanic come out and charge the system, release the refrigerant, et cetera. There is one man at one of the 3 or 4 people that knows how to work on air conditioners that could properly set the pressures, because I bought a high efficiency unit because I wanted to save money. It's different.
But basically, the legislature doesn't think people like you exist.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
All right, so you got involved in this. COVID starts. You're getting hacked off. Were you a politico before that? I mean, were you a junkie like I am before that?
No, not at all. I remember when COVID started getting serious. See, when I moved out to Sterling, and I never really watched cable before. I just watched DVDs out of the library, whatever. And I would see people leaving the grocery store with a train, like of carts, 2 or 3, and it's piled high. And I'm like, that's a person that likes to go to the bathroom because there was a stack of toilet paper 3 or 4 high. I'm like, well, golly, what's all that about? And then one day I woke up and I got, in the company email, and it says, our buildings are now closed. You're going to have an ID card, and we might have to consider getting papers for you so you can travel back and forth to work. And I'm reading this email and thinking, well, did I just wake up in Soviet Russia?
Yeah, so you were so out of it, you had no idea that a nuclear bomb called COVID exploded. And
none at all.
All right. And that was the wake up.
Mm-hmm.
So the wake up was not necessarily COVID, it was the government's handling of COVID.
Yeah, that would be a more accurate way to put it.
So now that you've been doing this for several years and your reporting and analysis is becoming more and more relied upon, talk show hosts use it, I use it, and it's becoming more valuable because it's a wonderful mix of research and reporting.
Yeah.
And that's what makes. So let's go through these let's just take the last session.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find most fascinating or underreported in the last year or so?
I think if you would say underreported, I mean, there's always fascinating to me, but underreported, I think one thing that could have been, speaking in terms of broad themes here, would be, I think the legislature thumbing their nose at people and hiding things from people. And it happened even all the way up until the end. I mean, I've written a lot about, it was Senator Fenberg's bill, and I forget who else may have been on it, but his bill basically to exempt the legislature from open meetings law. And then there was that turd of a bill by, I think it was Soper and Froelich, maybe, I forget offhand. I know it was Soper, but I forget who the Dem sponsor was, that was basically going to rewrite KORA law.
Our open records law.
Yeah. And then
So stop there for a second.
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah. We have 5,000 governments in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are subject to the open meetings law. That is, we have a transparent government. If the people in charge of a government are going to discuss policy and make decisions, we have a right to watch it, know about it beforehand, and it needs to be public. There's only one government in all those 5,000 which is exempt from that now, and that is the Colorado State Legislature. So, of course, politicians don't like the open meetings law. When we passed it, they didn't like it. They don't like the open records law. They don't like term limits. They don't like Tabor because it tells them they can't spend as much as they'd like of other people's money. Doesn't matter if they're R or D. Of course they don't like these good government things. And for Democrats, who used to be the ones most passionate about governmental transparency, to pass this so they can operate in the dark was ugly. And I'm ashamed of it. I'm ashamed that our governor signed it into law that these guys are somehow special and don't need to worry about open meetings.
Yeah. Well, keep the doing government business in the back room in your pocket for later, because there's one more thing I was going to talk about. But yeah, exempting themselves from the open meetings law. I testified on it the first time it came up, and I don't believe anyone at all, any group, testified in favor of this bill. And yet it still sailed right through. And it's just...
Hey, that's better than so many bills that they don't even take testimony on these.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, the big problem here is the individual people's access to their government. With that KORA bill and with some other things, they always exempt the media, and I think the media could do a better job of speaking up. But for me, the big thing is individual humans' access to their government. And an everyday person like myself, how are we supposed to find these things out?
If you're the Denver Post, if you're 9 News, you have reporters, and when these bills come through, there's usually an exception. You can you get the police scanner, citizens don't. And the Colorado Accountability Project, which you head up, is a perfect example of true citizens journalism, true citizens activism, and the reason why we have transparency in the First Amendment in the first place. It is there for you more so than the businesses who sell newspapers.
Yeah. And anything that they do that makes it harder. I mean, I have a full-time job and I have a wife and a kid. Anything that they're going to do to make this harder. I remember saying it when I testified about it. Think about what this says to the people in Colorado. Think about what a yes vote or this passing this thing is going to say to the people of Colorado. What are you saying to everyday people like me who just want to know what their government's up to? You're saying, no, you can't be in here. And also, and this was a bigger deal with that Cora, I think, than the open meetings law, but they're saying, see, these people over here, they call themselves media. And why the government is in the business of defining media is beyond me. But nonetheless, these people over here, they're special. They're media. We're going to have different requirements for you than for them. And I think they do it to buy their silence.
Also, there's a case in point with the ability to go on the floor, and that the Press Association decides who press is. And so Sherry Pike from Complete Colorado is denied press credentials.
Oh, really? I wasn't
while
aware of that.
other online news services are given press credentials. And that way they can decide who they want to have more access to our elected officials.
Yeah. Well, for a very, very brief time, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but for a very brief time during COVID, I actually was on the governor's press pool or whatever and went to one of his remote meetings. Never got a question through, but I was kicked right back out a minute later. They caught on to me or something. I don't know.
Heaven forbid they have.
I know. I write op-eds. I am not going to pretend at all, and I do not with any of my websites, that I strive for some sort of neutral or disinterested opinion on this. What I do, I'm always careful to source, and I always share those sources. But I'm not going to pretend
I'll say that
I'm
again.
unbiased. But
One of the things that makes your work exceptional is that everything you do is well referenced. It is a come to the same conclusion. Here's where I got my information, look at it, prove me wrong.
right.
And that's the way it should be. So you said there was something else in your back pocket about.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we get to the end of the session, and I forget if it was one or two. I know it's one, that Governor Polis in these backroom deals with big oil companies and the environmentalists or, environmental groups. I don't know much about that culture, but they strike this backroom deal where, well, yes, it's carbon and it's terrible and it's going to kill us all, but if you give us a fee, we'll let you go. We'll let you keep drilling. But the thing is twofold. Number one, that's done in the back room. Nobody gets access to that. And like you were saying earlier, we see the end product, so we got that part. But what we don't see is who was at the table and who was not.
I'll tell you who was not. Colorado-centric businesses.
Small
businesses. Oil and gas businesses who rely on this were not at the table.
Yep.
Chevron, Exxon, and the other one, I forget the name, they were there, and it was told, we've got these bills, we've got these initiatives to put you out of business, or you pay some protection money. You pay the protection money, and the big guys are like, well, that's just a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
But for the small guys, that can put them out of business.
Yep. And or it creates a barrier to starting a new business. If you start putting these fees, what you're doing is you're raising the hurdle. And if somebody wanted to start something, then I look and this list of fees that's longer than my arm. I'm like, I got to come up with all this money before I can even start planning how I'm going to get my equipment out to the field. Forget about it. I'll go somewhere else, or maybe I'll just not do it at all.
It's all made to slowly kill the extraction industries in Colorado. The number one industry that gives us the most money, makes more money than the government spends here in Colorado, and employs more people. It is the industry, and they're going to kill it.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about the governor.
Okay.
You've called him on a few things. Out of all the things that you've called him on, give me a couple that you find to be most onerous.
I think the thing that's most it's hard to say because, okay, so you can't get mad at a leopard for having spots, I guess. But I have to be honest, one of the things that I get upset with about him is it's just the duplicity. Like, he's a career politician. The duplicity with which he speaks.
What do you mean?
Some of that anger is also for the media who never call him on it. But I mean,
I
he
mean-
can choose
I mean,
what he
slap
says
down
and what he doesn't
that
say.
one.
Yeah.
And when they do call him on his duplicity, it makes a difference. I will go back to Kyle Clark on Prop HH saying to the governor, Governor, we're not stupid. We know what you're doing. You're taking money out of our refund here and giving it to us over there. We're not stupid. I think that was a turning point on people looking at that proposition. When the media, the mainstream media, wants to show both faces of the governor, it is powerful. And instead, we have the Colorado Accountability Project. We have Complete Colorado. Give me a couple examples of what you mean by the duplicity.
Well, so the one that we were just speaking about with the oil and the gas, I remember reading, it was some anonymous source had said, who's not at this backroom deal, right? And to me, anonymous sources are always a little bit funky, because I think if you're going to say something, you put your name to it and you say it. But then I got to thinking back, and I think that was credible that the small businesses were excluded, because, now this is an old one, but when Polis needed money to fund Prop EE, Universal Pre-K, I'm like, we're gonna tax those smokers. We're just gonna put money on them. We're gonna make them pay for it because nobody likes smoking anyway. So
I didn't smoke
them.
before then, but now because I like children so much, I've taken up the habit.
Well, bless you, sir. Bless you.
I hang around the playgrounds.
That's right. Anyway, they in order to get big tobacco, Altria basically, to shut up, he threw the little tobacco companies under the bus. That would be a perfect example. And that's why, even though that story had anonymous sourcing, I'm like, yeah, you look at that and you look at this big oil thing, yeah, I'm pretty sure, even though we never get to know, that those little guys weren't in the room. That kind of stuff drives me
And
up
little
a
guys
wall.
in tobacco, remind me if I got this right, we're the first state to do it, tax, I think it's by cigarette, or somehow it makes discount brands as expensive as premium brands.
Essentially, yeah. They wouldn't, I forget exactly how it was written, but it was done such that the little brands can't undercut the big guys. And so Polis...
Oh, it had a minimum.
Something like
here's
that.
the
yeah.
minimum for a pack of cigarettes is here.
Yeah.
So why would you buy the budget brand if it's going to be...
Exactly.
Yes, right.
And thus Altria says, like, okay, well, we won't fight you on it now because we've got what we wanted.
Yeah, it gets rid of our competitors.
And I remember hearing an interview with Polis once, and I think somebody hinted at or said something like that, and actually held his feet to the fire, and it was, well, it passed, didn't it? Was Polis's, to paraphrase him. And it was like, so does that make it okay?
I'll give you my favorite one that is happening as we speak, which is when he got into office, governors would write a letter to the EPA saying, hey, exempt us from this ozone requirement because it's not our fault. China, California has forest fires. The pollution comes here, mixes with our high altitude, gives us an ozone problem. There's not a whole lot. There's a little, but there's not a whole lot we can do about this. And governors sign the letter. The EPA goes, oh, that's a good point. Stamps the waiver, and therefore we don't have to do something silly like reformulate our gasoline. Well, Hickenlooper did that, but when Jared came in, right away he rescinded that application to the EPA. And now, today, years later, as we are on the eve of our gasoline going up 50 cents to $1 a gallon in the metro area because of his action. It wasn't the legislature. It wasn't a vote of the people. One man's action. He's there saying, oh, the EPA is awful, 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 and this reformulation thing is just insane. It's going to cause people to drive around to get cheaper gas. It's going to be worse. I'm working to get the EPA to rescind it. He actually said to the Denver Gazette editorial board that this is going to cause a supply crisis. So his sole decision, knowing it would cause a supply crisis, now he's out here saying, I'm going to solve this from that overreach of that evil EPA. He is trying to put out a forest fire that he himself started.
Yep. And watch how many members of the press are calling him on that. I'm gonna date. I don't know if you ever played it as a kid, but you had this deck of cards, and there'd be 2 cards with beach balls and 2
Oh,
cards.
right.
And you'd put them all face down, and you flip them over one at a time. And when you get that's the beach ball. I remember from 2 turns back, the beach ball's over there, and then you can pair them and take them out of the stack. I swear, I think our governor must figure that everybody in this state would fail miserably at that game. I know it seems like the press sure does, because he'll say things like that. And nobody ever says, hey, wait a minute. 3 years ago, you're the following.
Cause of this.
Well, and not just that, but I think it goes a little bit deeper, too, this would not be just Polis's fault, but more the environmentalists and I think the legislators who cater to them. We have put ourselves in a position where we have limited our supply so much that if we do have reformulated gasoline, we can't have pipelines. We can't have refineries here in this state. So guess what? Now we need reformulated gasoline. Well, we can't get it in from other states because we don't have any pipes that run in here. And we have one refinery, which they're busily every day trying to shut that thing down.
This is the Suncor refinery out in Commerce City.
Yeah, so if we do get this gasoline, Suncor is going to have to make it, which means Suncor, if they make a lot of it, they have to turn off that operation or all the other things they're making, like if they're making aviation fuel, and they're going to focus on reformulated gas because we need it a lot here in Colorado. Well, they have to shut that down, price goes up. We have to bring it in by truck, price goes up. Imagine if we had maybe been a little bit more thoughtful in terms of allowing more capacity to do this. It's
I'll throw out another one of the war on energy and how he hates fracking and how he destroys fracking, but he loves geothermal energy. Now, geothermal energy he calls the heat beneath our feet, which I also call oil and gas. Mm-hmm. But in order to get geothermal energy, what does one have to do?
You have to drill a hole into the earth, and then you have to fracture the rock that's in there, because the whole purpose is you either need to send water down so that water can pick up heat and then you bring it out, or you need to send water down in this spot and bring it up in a pipe in a different spot. You need to get the heat out, but water doesn't move through rock real well.
Right, you have to do hydraulic fracturing.
Right.
So hydraulic fracturing is awful when it's giving us natural gas, which has cleaned the environment probably more than anything else, but it's wonderful when it releases the heat below our feet. It is this type of hypocrisy that I cannot understand how our media doesn't jump on him for. What's the difference between these 2 frackings? Why is one good and why is the other one bad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we could probably spend an hour speculating. My thinking maybe a little bit here is protecting access. Although I have to be fair in saying that Polis will sit down with somebody like Kyle Clark. And Kyle Clark, again, give the devil his due, does actually hold Polis's feet to the fire a little bit. So I don't know why they don't do it. I do know that Polis is a very practiced, savvy career politician. And he's very good about being completely unself-conscious about hypocrisy.
I'll answer it. And Kyle and I don't see it eye to eye on a lot of things, but Kyle's a smart guy. He's a smart reporter. Mm-hmm. Sean Boyd is a smart reporter. Mm-hmm. These are TV reporters who, if they have enough time with them, can do this kind of stuff. But most reporters aren't that bright. And they're not well-versed in politics, and they're not well-versed in political history here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So he can double speak. He can rope-a-dope most reporters until the time is out. Mm-hmm. And he has, better than Bill Clinton, he has the ability to be whatever the crowd wants him to be. Mm-hmm. If he's in front of a bunch of environmentalists, he's an environmentalist. If he's a bunch of energy users, he talks about energy. If he's around tech guys, he's a tech guy. If he's, he morphs and he gives people what they want. Mm-hmm. And when you ask him a question, he answers a different one. You ask it again, he answers a second question. And then by the time you drill down, he's now moved on to something else. So it takes a real reporter to be able to go, you said this, then you said this, these are in conflict, which one? And then when he goes off to go, that's wonderful, that's not what I asked, what about these things? And we just don't have those reporters there, which is really a shame. The other part, I'll put it out. We have a supermajority Democrats in control of everything in Colorado, nearly everything. The press loves to talk about Republican dysfunction. And it is entertaining as hell. It really is.
Yeah.
But it's meaningless. It's like reporting on toddlers having a tantrum. It doesn't matter because they have no power. Yet they don't talk about the true dysfunction going on in the left between progressives and socialists.
Yep.
And that's the really one. All right. What are some of the stories you brought out that you are most proud of?
You know, I would say the stuff that I'm sort of most proud of in general, regardless of topic, is I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for decades by this point, and I enjoy being a teacher. I don't ever envision giving it up. And I would say that the things I'm most proud of, the things that I enjoy the most when I write about it, is the stuff that lets me educate people one way or another. So I teach math and physics, and I've written a fair bit about heat pumps. How does a heat pump work? What are the practical limitations of this stuff? What are the energetics, like the energy dynamics? Energy is moving from here to here to here with regard to that things. Or things like, I'll get interested. I get curious. A recent one was landfill fees. I saw in my local paper that the state of Colorado was charging landfill fees. And so I emailed over to CDPHE, Solid Waste Division, and I said, what the hell's going on here? And I researched about landfill fees. That may not necessarily melt everybody's butter, landfill fees or the physics of a heat pump.
It melts no one's butter.
Right.
It barely even melts margarine. But the fact is, that is where corruption in government is. That's where waste is. That is the kind of perfect public choice theory of some little thing that if you're on the inside, you get to manipulate, but it's too little for the average person to dive into.
Yep.
And it happens on every level of government, our 5,000 governments in Colorado, and then on every sort of little fee in business. It takes people like you who are curious. That's all it is. If I'm reading you right, it is a curiosity. It's an itch that needs to be scratched.
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense. Let me go do the thing that I know we can do.
Yeah.
Talk to the government and try to get an answer and bring it forward to the people.
Exactly. And one of the things, and it's one of the things I really like, is readers will tell me, thank you for looking into this and letting us know. Because again, that's teaching. It's just a different forum for teaching, but it's still teaching, and I really enjoy that. The other thing would be connecting people to ways in which they can get involved, big or small, in the government, or in a government here in the state.
Give me an example.
I don't write about it so much anymore because it's kind of old ground, for at least for what I'm doing. But how do you testify on a bill? Or I'll get people like, I don't even know who my legislator is.
Right.
Or what is Tabor? What's a fee? What's an enterprise? You know, like I think I mentioned it earlier, that people with full-time jobs and kids and life constraints don't necessarily know all of those terms. And so you might read an article and it's like, oh, this SB 21-450 is going to create an enterprise. It'll deal with waste tires or whatever. And if I didn't know what an enterprise was, I'd be like, cool. You know.
If you didn't know, this is a way to steal money from you and you take it out from Tabor so that government can grow.
Yeah, what you're going to see is next time you go get tires, there'll be a new $5 charge at the bottom of the bill that says something like disposal fee.
Not only
when did that happen?
But it means that it'll be harder for the government to hit their Tabor limit because they take bits of the budget out of the Tabor budget and put it off here.
Yeah, yeah.
On
And
that,
so,
on
yeah.
that, let me get on my high
No,
horse
no,
for just
sure. Go ahead.
a second. Before Tabor was passed, a quarter, maybe a third of the Colorado budget was outside of the general fund and other things. When you do that little fee trick, when the legislature calls something a fee, what it does is it pulls it out of the general fund and puts it to some other enterprise. Not really government, it's an enterprise. And the difference is the general fund is voted on by our direct representatives. It's taxation with representation. They decide the priorities. Money goes here, money goes there. We say, we don't like that, we're kicking you out. When it goes to the enterprises, it's appointed people who run all the enterprises. We don't get to vote on them. We don't even know who the hell they are.
Yeah.
The reporters aren't there, and we don't have a say. That is taxation without representation. Well, we had a frickin' revolution over.
Yep.
So take now, 30 years later, that ratio has flipped. A third of our budget is run by the state legislature. 2/3 is run outside of the legislature.
I didn't realize it was that much.
We now have a system of taxation without representation. And I don't care how you feel about the size of government, that should scare the fucking hell out of you that appointees are spending and deciding the priorities of 2/3 of your tax dollars. You know, I would say that we ought to have a tea party about that, but it has a bad connotation these days.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to give the press yet more things? I mean, because then, instead of it being a circus with Dave Williams, it'll be a circus with some guy with tea bags hanging off of his hat or something like that. But I would agree. And it has just gotten out of control in this state. And the common thing to say about an enterprise is it's a government business. It's a business that charges you a fee and gives you a service. And it has gotten to the point now where
it takes a fee.
Yeah.
You have no option.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of it. The other part is I read the language in some of these bills, and it is the benefit that we're to receive is so speculative. It's incredible. Like the one on rental car fees.
Right.
That's the whole state. Now, what we're all going to, even if it's just a U-Haul, you're going to move something out of your house to a storage unit. You're going to pay this fee now. So I'm way out on the Eastern Plains, and I'm going to pay this fee, and that fee is going to build a train to go out to Steamboat Springs and make us all feel better about crippling Craig. And I'm probably never going to ride this train.
It's just like the faster fees that were supposed to go in the bridge enterprise fees, which were supposed to build bridges, and you guys are paying for it, but you're not seeing it. It's going someplace else.
Exactly. And my benefit, according to the bill, is I think, if I remember right, is the cleaner air I will enjoy.
Of course.
But I don't live in Denver.
When you study it, transit doesn't give you cleaner air.
Yeah.
In fact, they never studied the ozone created by light rail and rail from the connection, the electrical connection that it makes, which is pretty sizable. All right, let's wrap this up. I am grateful for what you're doing. I'm grateful that a guy who just a few years ago was a political Nimrod, knew nothing, and just out of pure curiosity started asking questions. Most people have those questions. What makes you different is you did something with those questions. You went out to get them answered. And then you took the further step. You put it online for people to see. And it is having a huge impact. And I'm grateful. I want more people to do what you do and ask these questions.
Me too.
I'm assuming if people want to do that, you'd be willing to talk with them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm always happy to talk with people about ways they can get involved. And you can read what I write. Everything I put out there is open source and free, and it's available to anybody.
It's hard to get through the paywall, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I should put a paywall up. I always tease with my students, like when I ever do like remote classes, that I'm going to have it be that the recording of class will stop. And it'll be like, if you want the answer to the test,
for another 5 minutes.
That's right. It'll be one of those clickbait things where like students hate him and there'll be a picture of me in front of the board or something like that. But at any rate, it's all free, it's all open source, and I hope and I want people to get involved.
Right.
That's how I get my money for doing this stuff. I want people to get involved. So contact me. Take the Independence Institute small government training is another great way to do it. I did it. I really enjoyed it. That's
What did you
another
enjoy
great
about
way.
it?
I think, well, I mean, Miss Chandler's tone is great. She does a great job at that. But it's also the idea that you don't have to be doing this as a part-time job. You don't have to be full-time. You don't have to walk into the room as an expert, you know. But you could pick one thing, and you could just ask, is this the proper role of government? I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to boards, testified at the Air Quality Control Commission and other things, and the essence of what I'm saying, if they're doing some complicated rulemaking about air pollution or whatever, I get up there and my main question is why are a bunch of unelected people in a conference room in Denver deciding this weighty matters for the entire state? Is this the proper
Do you ever
role?
get a satisfied answer?
I think now that I've done it enough times, I was talking to my state senator, Byron Pelton, and he said he's starting to see eyes roll when they call my name to testify for bills.
Then you know you've hit it.
And the only other thing was one time it was the Energy Code Board, and I got this passive, no one said something to me, but one of the board members said to the admin, Susie, have we done public comment periods? And Susie said, yes, we did them on these days. Oh, CPW.
Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah. They kicked my butt out of the meeting because they didn't like what I said about the governor and his husband.
What did you say about the governor and his husband?
Well, in essence, what I said was that they screwed up how they released wolves because the governor and the governor's husband got a ringside seat, and that's when the guy's head blew his stack. And he and we didn't have, you can listen to the recording. I was not rude or profane. I said nothing wrong. I said nothing derogatory about anybody. Simply that, why is the governor and his husband there when the local officials weren't even given the respect of notification that they're going to be releasing wolves? And that's when the head CPW commissioner blew his stack, told me I was being mean or some such, and then they shut me up and kicked me out of the meeting.
But the fact of the matter was, Polis and Marlin were there.
Yes.
Watching the release. He opened up the cage and out it went. And local officials didn't know where, didn't know when, didn't know what was going to be released.
Yeah, right now we're talking settlement.
So you just said the obvious. You spoke fact in public comment.
Yeah. It was apparently the words ringside seat were somehow inflaming.
You say you're talking settlement. What does that mean?
So I tried getting a hold of media here and media there and this, that, and the other. And Rachel Gable, she's a friend of mine. She was good enough to...
She is a writer for the Fence Post, which is an
among others. Yeah, she does op-eds in the Gazette or Colorado Politics. I really like her. I really respect her for what she does for ag. And, you know, she talked about it in an op-ed, and I think Sean Boyd did, but that was kind of the end of it. Well, I had written to Public Trust Institute, I think, and they decided to take my case pro bono. Now, this, mind you, is the first thing I did was I tried to write the board and say, what rule did I break?
Right.
And I tried to write the head of the Department of Natural Resources. What rule did I break? What did I say that was wrong? Can you tell me why you shut me up and booted me out of an open meeting? And I got nothing. I wrote the AG's office, and after a couple of weeks of trying to get a hold of somebody, they threw a few internet links at me and walked off. Public Trust Institute got a hold. I sent them an email, and I'd given up on them, and they emailed me back after a few weeks, I think, and said, yeah, we'll take this up. So they started writing up a brief, and before it even got filed in the court, the AG's office said, okay, we'll talk to you, you know. And so now we're in the lengthy process of figuring out rules for, because it's an obvious case of violating both open meetings law and my First Amendment rights. And so
Because appointed officials,
Exactly.
Let me say it the third time, appointed, not even your directly elected officials, didn't like what you had to say.
Exactly.
And I was raised in a time when they used to say, I will defend to my death your right to say it. And now they just say, shut the hell up. We've got the power.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to Dallas May, who was the head commissioner. He's a nice man. I think his heart's in the right place. I think he just lost his temper and he did something that was wrong. And we've all done stuff that was wrong when we've lost our temper. So I don't necessarily have any bad feelings about him. Dallas May is a human being. What I do have bad feelings, and what really, really irritated me about it, was I tried to get a hold of my government to get some information on what I had done wrong and to try and find some sort of redress or something like that for an obvious error on their part. No one would answer me. And the AG's office wouldn't even talk to me really, other than just tossing a few links at me and say, oh, here, well, if you think it's a pattern in practice, you could go talk to the feds.
Again, let me go back to this and we'll leave it here.
Yeah.
You were curious. You had an opinion. You spoke. You were wronged. And you didn't just stop there. You went off and did something with it to try to change it. All of it, you seem, nonplussed by it. A lot of that stuff is very nerve-wracking for most human beings. Standing up to the government is nerve-wracking. Being gavelled down is nerve-wracking because it's a procedure you don't quite understand.
Yeah, and I get that. I guess what I would say is if you're nervous about it, just one of the things I'll tell my students sometimes, because I have older non-traditional students that I really like in math classes, for example, and they haven't had math in decades. They're really intimidated by it. And I'll tell them, like, do you have kids? Yeah, I've got 2, 3 youngins, whatever. If you can raise kids, you can pass this class. So I would say that to anybody out there, like, think about all the challenges in your life. And if you have kids, if you've raised kids, you could do this.
Let's leave it right there.
Sounds
Cory
great.
Gaines, thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.